Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from Yellowcat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. Let's get started. The most memorable fire me I frickin' dare you work moment you've ever had, part 5. I had only been with the company for a year. Prior to that, I had worked long stretches of time at a variety of odd jobs in between my university studies. We had a stepping up initiative at the time where people were hired as junior project managers and took on larger roles within the organization when the person performing the role went on vacation. When our CEO went on vacation, I was asked if I would be willing to take over as acting CEO for 3 weeks. I said yes, and when it really happened, I couldn't believe how smoothly the time went. It ended up being both the best and worst thing I have ever experienced. I accepted the full-time operations manager position that was offered to me when the CEO, who also happens to be 50% of the business, came back from vacation. I was in complete command of our budgets as well as the sales and production teams. My degree was entirely focused on project management, so I had no experience selling and no training. This was the issue. The market was volatile at the time, and after a 1-month honeymoon, we began to lose between $20,000 and $30,000 every month. Next thing I know, after this continues for 5 or 6 months, people ask me what I'm doing because, as it turns out, a lack of sales is the main cause. The 2 shareholders were completely unsupportive and saw my role in operations as a means of avoiding their unsatisfactory CEO responsibilities. I pretty much reached a breaking point where I had exhausted every possible solution and was completely at a loss for ideas. I detested working there, but I lacked the willpower to leave. I should also mention that the stress of it all, coupled with the daily reminders of how things were going, made me quite ill. I ultimately developed shingles, but I persisted. Our head of HR, who is also the head of the board, walks into a room with me around the 6th month, and I'll never forget it because it was obvious what we were talking about. I believe that prior to him saying anything, I said, "So I don't know what you have to say to me, but you can either fire me or I'm going back out there and keep working because I'm just simply not going to quit." It turns out that they moved me to their other company after realizing they had put me in an awkward situation. It took the company 18 months to get its sales levels right, and it turned out that the market was simply in turmoil. 2 months later, the CEO returned full-time and slashed half of the staff. In the end, everything worked out fairly well for me because I'm now the sole shareholder and CEO of that same company. When I worked at EB Games, I avoided a write-up by arguing with my boss for 30 minutes and saying that writing me up for what I did would be morally bankrupt. I told a customer who wanted to trade in a broken console and buy a new one that he was still under Walmart's warranty and could get his console replaced for free instead of getting a reduced trade-in credit. The receipt was still in the bag and the warranty expiration date hadn't passed yet. He said he didn't want to go through Walmart's warranty requirements, but he thanked me for helping him. Afterward, my boss threatened to write me up for sending the customer to a competitor. I spent the next 30 minutes telling him that writing me up would set a standard where employees had to put a sale before the customer's needs, and that not telling the customer he was under warranty when I knew he was to avoid losing a sale was manipulating the customer to get their money instead of meeting their needs. After agreeing not to write me up, he told me not to do it again. I told him I wouldn't promise not to in a similar situation, but he apparently got tired of fighting with me and dropped it. I nearly got written up for correcting this manager in front of a customer after he lied about a product to sell it. Since we fought so much, I'm surprised he never threatened to fire me, but he once told me he liked how I was willing to speak my mind, so I guess he respected it despite trying to write me up. Though I'm sure where I worked had the 3-strike policy, any write-ups would have contributed to my firing if kept. I worked at McDonald's, and for some reason, my boss hated me. We're gonna call her Haley, since that's her real name. F her. During one shift, Haley comes back and tells me to make salads. Usually, I'm on the grill at that point. As told, I go into the cooler and get the bag of salad ingredients and the plastic tubs for salad. The salads need to have the date and time they were made stamped on them so they know when to throw them away. I go get the date gun. As I start to make the first salad, Haley walks in and tells me it's time for my 10-minute break. She says she'll take over the place. I'm going now. After taking a 10-minute break, I come back to find all the salads ready and in the salad cooler in front of me. I go back to the grill. After about 30 minutes, Haley calls me into the office very loudly. When I walk in, she says, "Zushiba, when you made the salads today, you forgot to write the date and time on them. That is against our rules, so I'm writing you up." She slides me a pink note and asks me to sign it to show that I know what I did was wrong and why I'm getting this note. We have to sign these, and if we get 3, we're fired. This is my first. I think this is a joke when I look at her, but she means what she says. I realized I didn't care about the job at all in front of the other manager, who was in the office at the time. I told Haley, "You made those salads, you forgot to put the time and dates on them, not me. I'm not signing that." After that, I got up and went back to the grill. During the rest of my shift, I didn't hear from Haley. The other manager, who was there, didn't say anything either. When my shift is over, I go to the front desk and sign out. Haley stops me as I go to leave after going around the counter. "Zushiba, please stop what you're doing. We need to talk about your behavior today. Please go back to the office." "Haley, did you see me clock out?" I ask from the other side of the counter, in front of the customers, the other manager, and the rest of the staff. She says, "Yes," in her best voice, trying to sound like a big McDonald's manager. So I tell her, "Good. Once I clock out, I'm on my own time. I can spend it however I want, and I don't want to talk to you about anything on my time. I work with you tomorrow at 6 a.m. You can talk to me in the office for as long as you want after I clock in, but I'm leaving now." I then left. Seeing how shocked she and everyone else looked gave her a rush of adrenaline. I felt great. I almost skipped all the way home. I was sure I'd be fired in the morning, but Haley wasn't around. Instead, there was another manager on duty, and I got along great with them. Besides that, they hated Haley too. She grabbed me early in my shift and told me she wanted to give me free lunch today because another manager who was on duty yesterday had told her how well I'd been doing. I never did hear about that write-up ever again, and I rarely heard from Haley even when we were scheduled together. What unpleasant situations have you dealt with in your HOA or with S-Neighbors, Part 5? My spouse was fined by the HOA for placing his yoga mat in the fence surrounding our patio. Okay, that's fine with me. Nevertheless, they took notice of our tree. The species, a Brazilian pepper tree, was something that this woman detested. She insisted that we take it away from her. One thing to keep in mind is that it had been very well maintained and was quite lovely. According to her, there were some branches that were hanging over the boundary of the fence. At that point, we cut them. She continued by saying that it was higher than the roof. In order to demonstrate that this was not the case, we purchased a drone and took photographs. Subsequently, she stated that there were roots that fell through the fence and onto the lawn that was shared by everyone. I took pictures of trees in the neighborhood that were doing the same thing as mine. Every time, we were forced to attend their inane meetings on a regular basis. Subsequently, they asserted that the tree was responsible for the bending of the fence, and they demanded that we pay them $8,000 to replace it because it had just been replaced. My husband went and argued that the fence was at least 29 years old, that he had requested to have the fence replaced because of termite damage, but that they had declined his request because they said that termites are normal in California and that you should not be concerned about them. Therefore, it was necessary to replace it regardless, and there was a straightforward method to accommodate the tree. He also stated that this tree was an exceptionally good source of pollen for bees, the entire tree was buzzing with them twice a year, and that the loss of habitat was the primary reason for the decline in the number of bee populations, and that the removal of this tree would contribute to that decline. In addition to this, he argued that the term invasive species has its origins in xenophobia and is more of a subjective term than a scientific one. They couldn't have been more surprised, and during the meeting, they all came to the conclusion that we could find a solution to the problem. As of this point, we had grown wary of having to deal with him. Because we're going to be moving and renting out the condo anyway, we made the decision to reduce the size of it. After about a month had passed, we received a letter from an attorney informing us that we were required to reduce the size of the tree or else they would remove it for us and charge us, and that we were also required to pay the $225 fee for the attorney's service. Our argument was that the tree had been missing for a month and that they ought to get a life. We went and made our case. That tree was very appealing to me. What a bunch of jerks they are for forcing us to cut it down. Even before I moved in, my building was experiencing financial difficulties. A care facility flat was transformed into a regular flat as a result of the crisis, which resulted in the administrator being transferred to a company that completely gutted all of the facilities. After that, they began employing friends from all over the country to perform work at prices that were significantly higher than those offered by local businesses. They managed to get away with being completely opaque about their financial situation because the building still houses a significant number of elderly people. The administration of this ended up costing approximately 30% of the total budget. People have gotten into physical altercations at the association meeting because it got so heated. There are approximately 6 lawsuits that are currently being litigated. The administrator has made a name for themselves in the Netherlands as a result of the fact that they have repeated this action on other buildings. They're doing everything in their power to avoid being kicked out, in spite of the fact that the administrator, who also serves as the leader of the association, does not have the votes. The budget for 2015 has not yet been approved. On the other hand, the leader of the association, who is also the ex-wife of the administrator's CEO, is adamant about not leaving, and she literally ends meetings whenever the subject is brought up. Lawsuits have become the norm, and people have given up trying to negotiate a peaceful resolution to this situation. We bought this house about 6 months ago. We didn't know that the HOA was almost bankrupt. A building in our complex slowly started to slide down a hill in the late 1990s. They spent a lot of money to make the hill stronger, but after a few years, they found that the foundation was still shifting. Everyone had to be moved to hotels, and they had to pay someone to dig up the foundation of this 3-story building and build it again. Now that we're done with that, all of the houses are almost 30 years old and need new roofs. There isn't any money for this, though. At first, they said each property would only have to pay a $10,000 special assessment. But instead, they raised our rates by more than $120 a month starting this month. It might be able to go down after the roofs are replaced in 3 years. Our HOA fees have gone up to more than $500 per unit. I really want to sell our HOA and move into a house, but the prices of the houses in this area are too high, like $800K plus for a 2,000 square foot, 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house that was built 30 years ago and probably needs to be updated. New condominiums built. According to the bylaws, owners were required to wait until 75% of the property was sold before they could take control of the board. On the other hand, this is not a major issue because the condo developer who was in charge of the board before we took over kept saying that we were one of the best associations in the state because he handled the finances so well for us. When we took over, we were supposed to have a sizable amount of money in the bank that was in the 6-figure range. That didn't turn out to be the case, though. As it turned out, he never paid his portion of the dues, and when we finally took control of the management, he sent us a bill in the 5-figure range, stating that this was the amount of money that we owed to him. In the end, it was discovered that he'd been using our funds to pay for construction costs, labor costs for sales, and other expenses. Also, he lied about a variety of issues, including those related to construction. As a result of the fact that we had to fight for 3 years, during which time we had to deplete the monthly budget in order to pay lawyers, there was some conflict between the owners, as well as between the board and other owners. Because of the legal costs, we were forced to postpone the implementation of improvements and other services that we truly desired and required. In any case, after all those years and hundreds of hours of volunteer work that were contributed by the board and a few other owners, the Homeowners Association was able to walk away with 7 figures after accounting for legal fees. Without a doubt, it was an incredible adventure to say the least. I had never purchased a home before, so I was a little taken aback by the experience. Because we were able to catch him and provide the Attorney General with all the receipts and data, he was sentenced to jail for embezzlement. Great deal of effort was put forth by the Attorney General in order to secure his imprisonment. Despite the fact that the developer was a cunning criminal, the Attorney General was a tough guy who did not allow the criminal to get away with his crime. If you want to watch the part 4, click the link here. I'm very, very glad to see you all in the comments. Many thanks for support.